Welcome back to another episode of the Braun Performance and Rehab Podcast. Joining me today is Jakub Szylak. Jakub is an amazing individual that I had the pleasure of meeting while I was in Pittsburgh. I immediately looked at him and I was like, dude, this guy is freaking jacked. Jakub is doing some amazing work in the training space and has worked with both athletes and general population. Today, Jakub and I are going to be diving into the concepts of athleticism and if it has a age limit or age restriction, and if anyone can do athletic things in the process of progressing someone back into athletic-based movements, in addition to travel workouts for athletes, general population, and so on that way, and where we kind of see importance of healthy habits when we're traveling versus also enjoying the travel and vacation that we do go on. So really great episode covering some great points with a great individual. This episode and every episode in season 5 is proudly sponsored by Isophit. Isophit is my go-to for all things relating to isometric strength training and allows you and your athletes to win more and hurt less. For more on Isophit, you can check the description below. Enjoy. Jakub, welcome to the podcast. I'm super excited to work with you today, man. Thank you so much for your time and thank you so much for being here.
Dan, appreciate you having me on. Excited to be here. Let's get this party started.
Dude, for sure. And it's so crazy. I feel like you and I have so many mutual friends from Katie and Ryan and so on that way. It's crazy how small and tight-knit this world really is. But maybe for people who don't know you as well, or maybe they haven't heard about you and all the great things you're doing online and down there in Miami, would you mind filling them in a little bit about who you are and all that you do?
Yeah, of course. Let me take you back 7 years ago where it all started. Well, I've been in the industry for 7 years. I had an opportunity of working with a group of great strength conditioning coaches, training hockey athletes back in Chicago, doing that for 2.5 years before starting to work in more of a corporate setting, working with Equinox. And I've been with Equinox for the last just over 5 years. I was a Tier X coach for that company. Sort of my specializations in training. I mean, everything from weight loss, body composition. I'd say I'd apply strength and conditioning to Gen Pop in a more entry-level hybrid approach, because there's a philosophy that I have and that I believe in, that there's certain things that we can take away from the way athletes train that Gen Pop can also do themselves. And again, we're not talking advanced principles and training methods, but we're going into even basics of skipping, hopping, running, jumping to some level, some sort of shuffle, some sort of skip, gamifying it and making it fun.
Yeah, no,
I kind of went on a tangent there from like who I am, and we're a little into my philosophy there, but there you have it.
I like that. And I think you hit the nail on the head, plain and simple. The term athlete does not really have like a age restriction to it. We see all these amazing athletes nowadays who are playing high level sports into their 30s and 40s. And then obviously beyond that, like I can't even begin to tell you the amount of pickleball injuries I have seen lately from people 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, but this is literally like a way of life for them. And I'm all here for it. I'm all here for it. I think plain and simple, anything we can do to promote fitness and movement and engagement in sport activity across the lifespan, the better off everyone is going to be, quality of life and so on that way. So I think it's absolutely essential. And I think to your point, we really need to be able to work some of those S&C type principles, things that we often think about applying to like the high school athlete or the college athlete, beyond just the high school and college athlete, because even after college, people can still engage in sport. People can still do active things. Just because you hang up your cleats doesn't mean you're done being an athlete for life.
100%. And I think that's where, I mean, too, like people fall short. I forgot what the number was, but like individuals after college or after, I think it was early 20s or heading into the 30s, like never sprint again or do any sort of like voluntarily do any sort of plyometric or voluntarily sprint actions And then, from time after time, you hear the stories of like, hey, I wanted to get back into playing the sport, or I went to go, jump for a ball when I was playing catch with my kid, and ooh, like this popped and then this hurt. And like, well, that's just it when you're at my age. I'm like, no, I don't say that out loud, but like in the back of my head, I'm like, oh, I hear where you are right now. Like, it's not the age. You just haven't. I mean, again, age does play at some capacity, but if you haven't moved like that in years, yeah, something's going to hurt. Something's not going to feel great. But to say that you can't do that anymore, no, I don't believe it.
There's a old saying, use it or lose it. And I think people kind of forget what that means, but it's like plain and simple to your point. If you don't jump, if you don't sprint, and you don't do these things for years, your ability to do so is not going to be the same. And it's crazy because, as we're recording this right now, it's like summertime. And I don't know about you, but like for me, like going to the beach and doing fun things like, hey, throw the football around, play some spike ball, can jam, whatever it is that way. Like those are things that like everyone seems to like to do. And yet if we're not like prepared for those kind of activities, like you can turn a really good situation into a really bad situation quickly. I can't even begin to tell you the amount of times like kids will come to me, adults will come to me, and it's like, injuries from like things like that that should be enjoyable for people that everyone does when they're traveling or in the summertime and that sort of thing. And it just takes a downward spiral. So, with that in mind, how do you go about, considering all these fun things that people like to do in the summertime and just all the various activities, game wise, for lack of a better way to put it, people like to do? How do you go about like actually getting people to the point where they can at least do those things and enjoy life for the summer, assuming it's someone who hasn't sprinted or exercised or anything like that in years, like you just mentioned?
Yeah, I mean, it all starts with like if you're working with me, there's a needs analysis, of a readiness questionnaire, of just me getting an idea of like, okay, like when is the last time you have done something like this? So I have a better understanding of, okay, you either have never done it, you've done it, but it was a long time ago, you're occasionally doing it here and there throughout the course of a month or a week, or you're doing it currently daily. And that gives me, and then after that, also doing a bit of a performance assessment, just some entry level activity like movements, light plyometrics, just seeing how their body moves through these different assessments, for then me to be able to give them something to do with me, but also giving them something to do on their own. And two, it's a very it's like a ready, willing, and able question that I give them. Like, you want to continue to stay active when you're going on this trip, or you want to get ready for a certain competition or recreational event or whatever it may be. What are you willing to do outside of just the sessions that we have? And that could even be as general as, dedicating 10, 15 minutes to stepping outside and running down the block for 15 minutes, or taking these 3-4 exercises that we've done already together and doing those for, again, those 10, 15 minutes on your own. So took this away from Katie, movement snacks. What are some movement snacks that you want to snack on throughout the week when we're not together?
I like that approach a lot. I mean, first off, the importance of the individualization, and second off, providing people with stuff to do beyond just what you do in a session. Because, I think people think all their exercise or all their movement has to come from like their 30-hour block in the gym or their hour block in the gym. And it's like, what about the rest of your freaking day? Like you could do stuff outside of the gym. And I think that there's a lot of value and a lot of benefit to doing some of those things and just getting more movement. I think the more we move, the easier it becomes to move as well. So I completely echo that point. I really like how you brought up the movement snacks. That's something we've talked about with a number of people in the past, from Katie to Kelly Starrett and so on that way. And I certainly see a lot of value in just that promotion of general movement throughout the day. What's kind of your own kind of like timeline or criterion you look as far as progression goes for someone who hasn't done, quote unquote athletic things in a long time, whether that's 3 years, 5 years, 10 years? Like, are you saying like, hey, for every year you took off from activity, we have a year to get you back to that? Or what's kind of like the ratio and progression back for people like for you?
I think the quick answer is, as everything goes, is it depends.
Always.
I mean, it depends on their, again, it's like one of those things I look at. It's like, okay, let's say they haven't moved any and often throughout however long, and they start working with me, and they're going to start working with me 3 times a week, right? So there's already 12 1-hour sessions where we're doing way more movement than you were doing in the last 12 months, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I look at the amount of the frequency and the volume at which the amount of work we do in those sessions as already a huge increase in movement, low, moderate, high impact things, depending on where the individual is, as a big progression of its own. So as it goes month over month, let's say week over week and month over month, let's think about like the whole macro cycle. If someone's working with me for 12 months, I'm not really progressing, I'd say even quarterly. I'd say my golden rule for myself is 3 months before adding in any sort of like, I'm going to eat my own words there. I'd say I'll add in it because it's like, okay, what do we define as a progression then, right? Like if we're going from an assisted pogo hop, like a band assisted pogo hop, to just a bodyweight pogo hop, that's a progression that we'll probably be doing within the next 3-4 weeks, right? To a bodyweight pogo hop to, okay, just a side to side hop, or a front, like just a front and back hop, or a linear hop, or kind of gamifier hop, cover 5 yards, change direction however you want. Like those in themselves are progressions, which I'd have my clients, certain clients do I'll kind of add in every 2-3 weeks, generally speaking, if there's someone that's seeing me more often. If they're not, then I'll probably push that to 4 or 5 weeks. And then two, it's always gauging where that client is with, how their body's feeling, what kind of aches and pains are they feeling that day? Like, or is there just another route we need to take for this upcoming week because they've got a big stressor coming up, a meeting, a travel, a work trip of some sort. So that's why I would start with the it depends, because there's a lot of variables, but progressing, I'd say, to your initial question, every 3-4 weeks.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good general rule of thumb. And it's interesting because I feel like a lot of people don't progress. They just kind of stay where they're at. And it's like, well, no wonder why you're not seeing results. You're never moving the needle forward. I think the concept of progressive overload holds true at the end of the day. The body's going to adapt to the stimulus that you provide to it. And eventually that stimulus is going to become pretty easy and we have to add to it. I also think, to your point as well, there's value in some consistency there, and there's value in progressing the same movements and not just changing things up every single day. I think a lot of people get lost in this online culture of like, oh, wow, look at that cool movement, or look at this workout, or look at that workout. And the next thing you know, they're putting together a program where there's no actual rhyme or reason or rationale behind what they're doing and why they're doing it. And they're jumping all over the map. It creates a system of frustration for the client and the trainer because people don't see results and they're kind of stuck right where they were. But I mean, I guess at least they're doing cool stuff or attempting to do cool stuff that they saw on Instagram, maybe.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, I love the fact that it's getting people out, it's getting people active, they're doing something. Worst thing that you hate to see is like they were doing something, but then they got hurt and now they're not doing anything. Or something that I find a lot is, the common thread of like, I've been kind of putting things together and trying things out, but nothing's working. And then just my follow-up questions like, how have you been, measuring your progress? Oh, well, I haven't. Like, okay, we're getting somewhere. Like, how can we start to create some consistency, like whether it's picking your, top 2 favorite exercises from all these workouts you've been doing and just progressing them week over week with, volume, intensity, however you see fit. But yeah, usually that's it's one of those, I've been doing this and I have been getting to X. So I'm either going to continue to do this and hopefully get to X someday, or hey, it's time to change something up. It's time to measure and track what we're doing to get to that goal.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think that process of tracking things is essential and again, often overlooked. It amazes me how often people will program without looking at any kind of metric to see progress over time. And it's like, how do you determine if your program is successful or not if you're not measuring something, anything, even if it's just like a basic RPE? There's a lot of simple, low cost to no cost data that we can access that I think is absolutely essential in today's day and age. And I think the other piece, talking about summer again, is like I said, people love to travel. I've been traveling a lot more in the last month than I ever had like prior to that this year. And it's different when you're on the road a lot. Fitness is different, performance is different, and it's true across the like entire age range for that. I don't care if you're like the middle school, high school kid who's traveling with like the club team, or if you're like the rec league pickleball player who's now got to drive 3 hours for a tournament, or even, I'm seeing a lot of strongman competitors and strongman powerlifting type athletes who are, 30s, 40s even, and they've got, 3, 4 hour drive one way for a competition, or maybe they're just going, 3, 4 hours for the weekend and they want to get some training in. And I think this concept of travel workouts or workouts when you're on the road is also something that we kind of misunderstand or maybe don't fully grasp correctly. And I think a lot of it comes back to the impact that travel has on us. Like, if you're sitting on a car, you're sitting on a plane for a couple hours, like we kind of forget what that does to us when we're, maybe up on our feet moving around all day. It's different. It's taxing. It can be stressful. At least, if you're flying like a long distance, I always find flying can be stressful. Time zone change kind of throws you off. Like you mentioned before, with progression, there's just so many variables. So when you're traveling yourself, because I know you kind of, we literally met in Pittsburgh and you're from Miami, how do you go about structuring your own kind of workouts when you're on the road? And how do you go about modifying client programs when they're on the road?
Depends, like short trips like that, I'm not really gonna think too much on it. It's like I'm gonna, depending like with where my program is right now, I can front load a lot of my resistance training days prior to like a trip to Pittsburgh. And honestly, one of the great things of me I've recently done, I'd say almost a year, and I'm just being a consistent runner, and now having running at my disposal is something I'm so happy I can do now, because I just wasn't a good runner prior. So now it's when I do have these short trips, I'll take advantage of bringing my running shoes with and hitting a jog for whatever distance I may be going. Because one, I'm getting some good cardio output in. I'm checking out the scenes around a neighborhood or around the town on my feet. And it's, to me, super relaxing. Now, when it comes to clients, also, it's going to be something around what they feel like they're able to do on their trip. And that's my main thing. I'm not going to be like, hey, okay, when you're on your trip, you're going to be traveling here. So we'll go as far as like even sitting down and finding gyms around the area if they want to find a gym in their area or use a hotel gym. Or if they're just not willing to do that, it's what can they do within the scope of the body weight exercise that they have in their hotel room, or also taking advantage of a jog. Or is it just going to be specifically focusing on something nutrition based? Like, are there certain things that we've been practicing, that you've been practicing through your daily actions that you are now aware of and can apply to your travel, right? Because you're away from home, you're not You don't have your kitchen, your guys are going out. From what we've been discussing, from what you've been working on, how can you apply this action and this kind of mindfulness skill into your travel? Even if it's something as simple as, I'm going to take a look at the menu, I'm going to find my favorite protein options and what those dishes look like, and I'm going to pick one of those. And let's say I'm going to have a glass of water in between every glass of wine that I have. Something as simple as that to help continue promote their goals that they've been working on while we've been together and in between their traveling journeys. Because the last thing I say is like, okay, yeah, like, sure, we've been working for this many months and now you're going to go take a trip for a week. It's like, okay, you've been working so hard and now you're just going to say, fuck it, I'm not going to do anything on this trip. Like, I'm not going to be aware of what I'm eating, how I'm training, how I'm sleeping. That's on the coach now. That's on me to get an idea of why their head's in that position to begin with and going back to their goal and seeing what are they ready and willing to apply on this first trip since working with me, whether it's something around exercise, whether it's something around nutrition, whether it's something around regen. Like, okay, if this is the one thing that you can work on and it's doing a 10-minute body weight workout in your hotel room or just hopping on the treadmill for 10, 15 minutes and doing our like interval, whatever it may be, do that. Do that. How much time are you willing to put into this? And then me as just a coach, I'm going to challenge you to get 10 more minutes in because you know you can.
Yeah. And I think you brought up so many amazing points. And ultimately, these are things that are not going to like ruin or derail your travel. If anything, I think it's going to enhance it. I don't know about you,
Sure.
but I always feel better after I wake up and do something active or exercise related. So much so that I kind of wake up and move every single day, because if I don't, I just don't feel right. It just, I don't know, the day doesn't sit right with me. So if I'm going to travel, if I want the most out of my day from a quality of life standpoint, and again, I don't care if this is performance related or if it's just general health and fitness related, I think that there's a lot of value in having some kind of movement practice, movement routine, something as simple as, like you said, just go outside, crush a couple mile run, crush a little walk, just something to keep the train of progress moving forward instead of stopping and derailing the whole thing. Because as you know, and as many of your clients, hopefully have been able to avoid, it's really difficult to get that train rolling again once you derail it with like, a 1 or 2 week bender where it's like, 6, 8, 10 drinks a day and all the good food and not a whole lot of movement. Like, you can really lose a lot in a short amount of time. And that's just a statement of fact, again, across the lifespan. I don't care if you're a high school, college athlete, or if you're, 50-year-old, 60-year-old trying to like get back on track or whatever it is. Like, you take 2 weeks off of anything and just derail the entire process of improving your health and performance. And it's really, really difficult to get going again.
100%. And that kind of put a little cherry on top there with what you mentioned. It's even not so much just the grand scheme of things, the short-term goal that person's working on. It's the habits that they're building along this journey so they can continue to feel as good as they are now 50 years down the line, giving them the tools in their toolbox to now understand the right from wrong and knowing what they like and what they don't like and what they're open to doing, what they're really good at, based off of these just daily actions and consistency that they've put in right now.
Yeah, no, exactly. And on top of that as well is like, I'm even thinking in my mind about like, if you're a strength coach or a PT or someone like that who travels with a team, like being someone who leads by example, so that we don't end up with people who are 40 or 50 or 60 and have gone years without doing any kind of movement or anything athletic. Like, if I'm the strength coach or I'm the PT, I'm on the road with the team that way, could I get up and do something active just to show them how important it is and lead by example? So then maybe someday after sport and after, they kind of hang up their cleats and so on that way, they kind of look back and say, wow, they were always doing that. Maybe I should do it too. And they have some kind of like almost like role model to look up to make their relation with movement and exercise more healthy. And I might not have worded that the most eloquently, but essentially, I just feel like it's one of those things where doing these little things, even when you're on the road, even when it's summertime, you never know who's watching and you never know what kind of impact it can have on someone else even later in life.
Beautifully said. I mean, just, being that role model for whether it's your kids, your athletes, family members, friends, just that one individual that, is walking down the sidewalk while you're jogging down, and wow, I
Yeah.
want to be able, I want to do that. And it's, as I say that, there's a story that comes to mind where my good buddy of mine, we were going on a long jog over here in Miami, small, quiet neighborhood. We're right at the tail end, and there's a block we just entered a new street block, and we're like, okay, once we pass that tree out in front of us, let's book it. Let's see who makes it down to the end of the block first, and we'll just do a flush out run, a flush out jog, just to cool us down before we, finish off the day. Hit past the tree, we hit it, we're going full speed, just something out of like a Tom Cruise movie, just slow mo, just it's hot, sun's out, pop, 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 pop. And then as we complete the sprint, I'm not going to tell you who won, but as we complete the sprint, we're slowing down, and there's a guy walking his two dogs, and he's like, guys, like, we have no idea who this guy is. He's like, excuse me, guys, I just wanted to tell you that I've never seen anything like that before. That was one of the coolest things I've ever seen. Just seeing a couple of dudes being guys, being active, running outside. Like, that was really inspiring for me to just witness. Just kind of acknowledged him, walked away, and like later on, like, wow, like, hopefully that inspired that man to, take a step into his fitness journey if he wasn't in it already, or inspire him to get some extra activity in. So yeah, random story sort of, but I feel like it touched up on what we were just talking about.
Yeah, no, exactly. You're right. You never know who's watching. And to your point from earlier as well, that whole like travel fitness thing can look so different for everyone. Going back to your point on it depends, and there's so much gray area in this. I love the jog run example. And I think that's such a great way to, as you mentioned, explore a new place, get outside, move around, get the heart rate up a bit. But you could do the same thing on a bike. You could also just go for a real long walk. My first day in Pittsburgh, I think we hit like 32,000 steps, which I
Easy.
slept real good that night after walking like 16, 17 miles. So it's one of those things where that concept of fitness looks different for everyone. But also, this is also a great opportunity to explore new avenues in fitness as well, right? Like, find that local like yoga in the park type thing, or go out there and just kind of find anything new that you can do for movement. You mentioned about the hotel workout, I think. And it's one of those things where I think people often kind of bash the hotel because it's like, well, they don't have much equipment or I don't have much to work with. And it's like, instead of looking at that as a limitation, maybe look at it as a challenge. Like, okay, I've just got my body weight. What can I do? What can I manipulate? What can I change to still get challenged from this? Do I do higher rep work? Do I do longer time under tension? Do I use literally the wall and do like a whole series of isometrics? Like, the concepts that you can apply are literally endless. And I think it's just a matter of, you're only limited by your creativity when it comes to travel.
100%. 100%. Yeah. Like and it's as powerful as what you mentioned in the beginning of just reframing from looking at it as a limitation to like, okay, where's my opportunity of like, what can I do here right now? Right. There's a little crappy treadmill. Well, I could sit on an incline and do some intervals on the incline treadmill here for 10, 15 minutes, or calisthenics. Like, yeah, I think that goes back to just the power of, us as coaches and helping our clients reframe what they see as limitations. Because at the end of the day, it's like, make that a non-negotiable when you're traveling.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And it's also one of those things, as we mentioned, it looks different for everyone. What's your approach, or do you have any kind of stories / case studies of people that you've worked with when it comes to travel, but there's some kind of competition involved, whether that's, again, the freaking local pickleball tournament to the lifting competitions or athletic events or that sort of thing. How do you go about changing what you recommend to people when they're traveling, when there's some type of competition or activity involved? Do you still kind of recommend the same things? Do you lower the intensity a bit? How do you kind of modify based on the activity that they're doing when they're traveling?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of with the current clients that I'm working with, there's no one that's doing an active or like a training for a competition or a recreational competition like that when they go and travel. It's usually for something business-esque, and which I deem to be in their scope a competition that they're preparing for. And that's kind of where my brand aligns with, is kind of understanding that you still are an athlete in that case, because when you step into that meeting, you want to be physically and mentally sharp to be able to be your best version and get your, at the end of the day, the intended outcome that you're looking for. So we want to create a routine that's going to help you do that. And again, that's going to start with adjusting to what we have available at that gym or in that space that you're in, with the time that you can allot for yourself with movement. When it comes to nutrition, it's kind of just recommended on, let's stick to eating things that you're already familiar with, right? Because even like with athletes, it's like, hey, I don't want you to go try that new breakfast spot and get something that you've never had, because we don't know how that's going to impact your digestion and how your stomach's going to react to it. So try to find consistency there. And then sleep and recovery, the biggest top of the totem pole, where it's like, okay, where are we staying? Do you have control? I think of variables like, do you have control of the internal temperature of the room, like recommended temperature? Do you have a sleep mask that you're wearing? What time are you going to bed? What time are you waking up? Are you allowing yourself to get at least 7 to 8 hours? So general breakdown, I'm looking at those 3 components for the clients that I'm working with, that I think at some capacity, athletes would also be needing to take into account.
Yeah, 100%. And going back to what I mentioned before too, about how travel can be stressful for people, I think all of those things actually help, not just from the performance side of things, but again, going back to enhancing quality of your time or quality of your trip. If you're sleeping better and actually waking up like refreshed and ready to go, lower stress, hopefully, better trip overall, because maybe you've got a little more energy to tackle your day.
Yeah. And I want to add an asterisk to that too, because if you're on vacation, enjoy yourself. And at the end of the day too, it's like one of those things where understand that the value of like regeneration, and you're traveling for like vacation for a reason, to disconnect, to enjoy yourself. And hopefully at this stage of your life with working with me, you've on your own found the value and the fun and the appreciation for, I want to go out for a run, I want to go out, I want to do a long walk along this area that we're in, or I'm going to take my 15 minutes to do my workout, because I know how much better I feel, and just how it's going to impact like how great of a trip I'm going to have. And then too, around the nutrition, unless it's a competition or a big business meeting, let's say, if I'm on vacation, I'm going to have whatever the hell I want, and I'm going to enjoy it at its fullest and not feel guilty for it, because that's why I'm there.
Yeah.
And I love food.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think that's a great point as well, is it's about the balance at the end of the day, I guess you could say.
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like we've covered a lot of ground as it relates to travel workouts, running, and this whole concept of the fact that athleticism doesn't really have an age restriction to it, and you can still be a athlete even after high school sports end or college sports end. And there's so many different things now that you can still compete in and continue to enjoy like the active lifestyle. And if you're someone who hasn't been doing that, there are ways to progress back into it safely and get you back to doing the things that, you might not think are possible right now. You just have to work with, I would say, the right coach, trainer, PT, the right support staff and team, I guess I'll say, because it really takes a village sometimes. It's not a one-man show in 2024, in my opinion. And I think the more that we collaborate together, the better off the individual we're serving is going to be. But I know that as we've talked about, Jacob, you're really freaking good at all these things. So maybe someone's listening and they're like, hey, I want to hear more about this Jacob guy. I want to reach out to him. Where can they find you at, and what kind of things are you offering?
For sure. Right now, best place to reach me would be off IG. Slide into my DMs, JAKUB_SIZZ. There is a website under development, so I'm excited to get that launched here towards the beginning of Q3. With what I have to offer remotely, is the join the everyday athlete community. So whether it's our community forum or doing one-on-one remote coaching, which also has included remote nutritionist that helps us out. There's also a remote concierge service that does blood panel testing. Mark Health, great company that I've paired with. So it's very comprehensive to our everyday athletes.
That's awesome. I like that. And I like the no stone unturned approach and covering all the bases that way, because as we mentioned, there's a lot of factors in play here. And the more we look at everything and collaborate with each other, the better off we're all going to be. Is there anything we missed as we were talking today, Jacob, or any other closing thoughts or remarks that you might have?
Closing remarks is, if it's good for you and you feel like there's a wall that's preventing you from wanting to do it, find a way to do it, right? Even like, just as an example, me earlier today, I woke up and I was going to go for my morning jog, but I had every reason to not go on my morning jog. Go on my phone, go do this, go do that. I'm like, pause. First of all, it's Sunday. You have more than enough time to do your morning jog. So where I was going with that is I think there's just something beautiful to be said about making time priority and valuing your body and what you have right now, and allowing yourself to make non-negotiables for yourself that'll make you just a better person. And that's, it starts with something around exercise, what you're eating, and how you're managing your sleep, stress, and recovery. It's kind of a long-winded closing remark, but
yeah, no, I like it though. I like it. You hit the nail on the head, and you brought up so many amazing points throughout our podcast today, Jacob. And I really appreciate your time and really appreciate your knowledge and expertise and everything that you've shared with us. And I'm looking forward to collaborating with you again in the future, man. Always a pleasure seeing you.
You too, Dan. Thank you for having me on today. It's been a pleasure. Can't wait to do it again.